Welcome to the City Club of Eugene's April 5th, 2024 program. My name is Andrew Kalk, and I am City Club's president. We are proud today to be part of the University of Oregon's conference titled Extra Extra, Don't Kill the Messenger, a 4-day gathering to listen to and converse with international journalists, writers in exile, and scholars of journalism. And we're coming to you from our home at the 5th Street Market in the heart of downtown Eugene. It's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our speakers and to all of you joining us here in person, online, or over the radio. For 3 decades, the City Club of Eugene has remained dedicated to its founding mission, to build community vision through open inquiry. In accordance with our mission and purpose, we hope to connect people throughout our community and across generations, identities, experiences, and perspectives. You are invited this week and every week to join us in this effort, to share your wisdom, to learn something new, and to take active steps to make a difference in this city and region that we all love. Of course, we cannot do this work alone, so a special thank you today to our Platinum, Community, and Diamond sponsors. The Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce, serving as a catalytic leader in creating a vibrant and diverse economy that drives economic opportunity and well-being. Kaiser Permanente, which exists to provide high-quality, affordable healthcare services and to improve the health of our members and the communities we serve. More information at www.kp.org. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. Get more information at uoregon.edu. Peace Health has been proud to serve Eugene, Lane County, and beyond as your hometown healthcare partner for more than 80 years. The Peace Health mission is to keep you and your family healthy. Learn more at peacehealth.org. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. And thank you to the City of Eugene for its support as well. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a long-time listener, I invite you to support our work by becoming an individual member, a business or community sponsor, or by volunteering to be part of a committee or our board. You can do all those things and more at cityclubofueugene.org. With that, I'll turn the mic over to the chair of City Club's program committee, Joel Corin, the coordinator of today's program. Joel.
Thank you, Andrew. About 6 months ago, we had a program here on the dangers to journalists around here. Professor Peter Laufer told me that in 6 months, he's going to have an international conference here in Eugene to deal with the issue of the danger to journalists and what to do about it. That program, Extra Extra, Don't Kill the Messenger, is here. And it's a 4-day conference, and you will be able to review this document and see what is going on tomorrow and Sunday and this afternoon. Admission is free. It's at the ERB building on the campus. And today, we are honored to have 3 of the speakers at that conference to talk about the dangers to journalism. It's a deadly profession, and there have been worldwide, between 2016 and 2020, UNESCO reports there are 400 killings of journalists, a 20% decrease. But does that mean that the governments are killing less, or does it mean that reporters have been silenced? The problem, too, is that 73%, rather, just 13% of those killings have been brought to trial. 73% of 625 women surveyed experienced online violence in the course of their work. 20% of 596 women journalists have been attacked or abused offline in connection with previous reporting. Today, you will hear from Farai Gonzo, who was a journalist in Zimbabwe, an award-winning journalist in Zimbabwe, and when threats to her forced her to move to Toronto, Canada. You will also hear that the problems are not only international. You will hear from Professor Kimberly Mangan on her studies of the black press and how that was shut down in various places. And you will also hear from Charlie Dietz, Professor Charlie Dietz, who brought students to last year's World Conference at the UN on the dangers to journalism, and also had the students go out and do some research. You will hear what the students are doing this year, talking to people who have moved to this country, fled to this country, and how they get their information from their previous place of residence. You will meet some of these students. That's our program for today. You're going to enjoy it. Farai?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Farai Gonzo. I was born and brought up in Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia. So Zimbabwe initially was colonized by the British. And growing up, I didn't know we were under a colonial rule because in my small world, I believed I was living a good life. It's only after my father took me to his workplace the other day, he worked as a mechanic in town, that we were going home on foot. It was like a walking distance. So my twin brother and I wanted to pass through the park. And my father was saying, don't go there, you are not allowed. And we could see our young counterparts, the white ones, they were playing in the park and wanted to understand why. And they said, no, we can't go in there because we are not white. Then I was about 5 years. It put a seed in me. So during the War of Liberation, Zimbabwe, it's a landlocked country and it's good for agriculture, minerals. It's a rich country in minerals. So the land was owned by 15% of the arable land was owned by white people, and the black people were moved into reserves where the land was not good enough for farming. So that's what triggered the War of Independence. So there was war in my country, and my country was born in 1980 as a result of war. So when the country was born, we had a President Robert Mugabe who had led part of the Liberation War. So he became the prime minister, eventually a president. So what was agreed for Zimbabwe to get its independence was that the farms that were rich in soil would be given also to black people. So there was a Lancaster agreement that was done at independence that the government of Robert Mugabe shouldn't touch on land until after 10 years, where the British government would buy off the land from the farmers, the white farmers, and the land be allocated to black people. So after 10 years, it didn't happen, and there was a change of administration in England. It was Margaret Thatcher before, then Tony Blair came into power, and he didn't honor that agreement that was done at Lancaster House. So the people who had fought the war now, the war liberations, they started slowly going into the farms and taking the farms of the white people. So it wasn't like a good move. There was like bloodshed and there was chaos in the country. So what happened, that was towards starting 2003, 2004, 2005. So the people also in Zimbabwe now, they were becoming restless because what was promised by the government wasn't happening. So people started migrating from rural, because majority of people were living in the rural areas. The cities we had like a few people. So a lot of people started moving from rural to urban. So when they moved in, they didn't have enough accommodation. But then in Zimbabwe, you have a rural home and an urban home. So when people come from rural areas, your relatives, you just house them, and they don't tell you when they're leaving. They can be there for a long time. You don't ask people when they are leaving. So what was happening, there were like so many that people were starting to build shelters, like makeshift shelters outside their homes. So the government didn't like that because what was happening, there was going to happen an AU conference, African Union conference that was going to happen in Zimbabwe. So the government didn't want that to be seen by people who came. So they moved those people to squatter camps. They just moved them to go and live in houses they made themselves with, sometimes with grass and dirt. They just made makeshift houses. So that's when we came in as journalists now. We were reporting on how these people were living. So we went and reported, asked them. They didn't have water, they didn't have sanitation, their children didn't have schools to go to. So we were reporting on that. So I did an interview in one of the squatters, and I visited the Minister of Education, the Minister of Housing, all the three ministers concerned. And also, we might want to know that children in remote parts of Zimbabwe, most of them didn't have education because primary education is free. You can go without a birth certificate. But when you come to secondary school, which starts at, there's grade 1 to 7, and then form 1 to 6, we use the British system, and then university or college. So they didn't have birth certificates to proceed to secondary schools because they were born into houses, they were just born into homes, and they went to school. So we took that opportunity to ask the Registrar General about the registration of rural children who couldn't proceed to school. So I compiled my documentary, and it was aired on the radio and television as well. So the Minister of Information, it didn't dwell right with him because the timing was wrong. There was an international conference happening, and I was given a warning that I shouldn't do that thing again. So it so happened that opposition parties were starting to emerge, like the MDC, and they also had their commercials. They wanted to invite people to go for a rally. So because I was moved temporarily to go to the marketing department so that I stopped doing programming. So I took in those commercials and I put them on air, and that's when I was called to the parliamentary hearing. So I went in there, and they thought I was being sponsored by foreign people to do what I was doing. We had come from China for a conference, so they thought we were taught to report objectively. So there was a questioning that happened, and I went home. Then after 2 weeks, they had to go to my mother's rural area to look for any sign of memorabilia, anything, proof that I was getting money, I was being sponsored. They found none. So we were taken, there were 5 of us, we were taken for interrogation at the it's called Chikurubi maximum prison, but we were not in prison, we were in the holding cells. So they were asking us a lot of questions about how come we are not honoring the government, because when you train as a journalist, you actually pledge your allegiance to be loyal to the government of the day. So we had done that at school, at college. So they said you are breaching the laws, and even when you were hired, all these things you are breaching. And so what they would do at night, they would water the floor and electrify it. So we would sleep with our feet off the floor the whole night. So they released us for a week, and we were supposed to go back for further interrogation. So Amnesty International now heard about that, and they told us you need to leave the country. So it was now 2007. So I didn't see the magnitude of what was happening there, because I was just thinking it's a thing that we're going through and I'll get support from other journalists. And they said, if you don't leave, you will be killed. I had kids, I had a life in Zimbabwe. It was okay, I was good. But they said, you need to leave. If you don't leave now, we won't help you. So the 4 of us left Zimbabwe. So we left by car from Harare to Masvingo. Is closer to a border with South Africa. So in Masvingo, we had to change cars and we go to where they call Rushinga, because they didn't want us to be trailed, until we go to Beitbridge border. into South Africa, and we were taken to the airport. So good thing I had still had an American visa, because I had been an intern at the United Nations headquarters. I had won a Doug Hammarskjöld scholarship, and I was there. So my visa was still valid. So we were taken to America. So there's this organization called Freedom Forum. It helps journalists who are being persecuted. So we were in America for 4 months, and they said, you need to sort out your papers. Do you want to stay in America, or you want to, there are 2 places to stay, America or Canada. But my other 3 colleagues chose to stay in America. They are working for Voice of America. I chose Canada. I don't know why though, but I think, I know, because growing up, we would do the history and geography of Commonwealth countries. So I could sing about the provinces of Canada since I was 9 years. I used to enjoy saying Saskatchewan. I didn't know what Saskatchewan was. So when I came to Canada, I crossed over to Canada as a refugee, and my papers were processed by the government, and I got a job to work at TD Canada Trust at a bank. I didn't know any banking. I even told them. So we were trained to do a call center thing. So after 6 weeks of training, I received a call on the floor. And I just say, welcome to TD Canada Trust. My name is Farai. How may I help you today? So the woman was across the phone. She said, I want to change the amortization from my mortgage. And I froze. I was just, because I thought I was going to pay a bill or make a transfer. I was just mum. And she said, is it your first time on the phone? I said, yes. Then she says, breathe. So the manager was listening, and he quickly came in and took over the phone. And I had to get another training. I didn't want to do it. They said, we just want your demeanor, your attitude, and everything. Then I was trained again. Then I got it slowly, I got it. So the Centennial College where I work, they have a Scholars at Risk Network department. So they were looking for academics or journalists who had master's programs so that they can house them. So they went to a place where I lived. They called them shelters, but they are houses. They were going house by house looking for any journalist who had a master's program, and they identified me. And they came to me and they told me about this thing. I didn't understand it, and I told them I'm not a scholar, I'm a journalist. They say it's the same thing. We're going to house you and we're going to help you. So it was actually under duress that I had to go there, because at college I was going to get a little bit more money than the bank. So I went to college, and they put me in the Global Citizenship Office, where we do the school magazine, as well as work with students who go out to go and do experiential learning in other places. So while I was there, I trained to be a teacher. They have a program where you train teaching and learning in higher education, the Ontario Colleges of Teachers. So I did that within a year, and I was introduced into the classroom. So the Scholars at Risk helped me to do that course, as well as to support me even mentally, even emotionally, because they were telling me that you are here, so you have to work what we have. I was still thinking about home. And they facilitated as well my PhD at the University of Toronto. It's so hard to get a place there at the University of Toronto, but I got a place and I did my PhD, so I'm still teaching there. And in a nutshell, that's me. That's how I left Zimbabwe for Canada. Yes, my time is over. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Joel, for this invitation, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Andrew. It's really a pleasure to be back in Eugene, and it's so nice to be here in front of all of you at the City Club. I'm going to talk briefly today about a different sort of exile, the divide that exists between the black and the white press. Freedom's Journal, the first newspaper owned and produced by and for Black Americans, debuted in New York City on March 16, 1827, 197 years ago. Not only was it a momentous event in journalism history, but it also signaled the founding of the Black press, a collective term for media that to this day center Black voices, issues, and stories. Initially, the weekly comprised 4 pages, each with 4 dense columns containing national and international news, correspondence, editorials, literary offerings, and a variety of advertisements for Black merchants and businesses. As the editors stated in the inaugural issue, whatever concerns us as a people will ever find a ready admission into the Freedom's Journal. In the late 1820s, that included the issues of slavery and abolition, as well as literacy, education, self-improvement, and racial uplift. The editors encouraged readers to plead their own cause, essentially to speak for themselves rather than be spoken for by others. This was critical at a time when the white press not only vilified Blacks, but also published sensationalized reports of crimes they had purportedly committed. Freedom's Journal provided a contrasting view by publishing positive accounts of Black Americans and their successes, and news about crimes committed against free people of color. Indeed, the editors stated in the first issue, "Experience teaches us that the press is the most economical and convenient method by which the moral, religious, civil, and literary improvement of our injured race is to be obtained." For 2 years, until it ceased in March 1829, the weekly newspaper linked Black Americans in various locales in the North and South and disseminated what the editors called useful knowledge. It also preserved the history of people, places, and issues. As such, Freedom's Journal is an important memory capsule, as one scholar has written. Even more, Freedom's Journal established the importance of an independent press as a means to advocate for racial uplift and promote self-determination and civil rights. It was a model for subsequent Black newspapers published in places such as Pennsylvania, Virginia, Illinois, California, and right here in Oregon. Edward Kennedy was among the 10 men who launched the Advocate in September 1903. With this issue, they proclaimed, the Advocate makes its initial bow to the Portland public as an independent, nonpartisan, non-sectarian weekly newspaper for the intelligent discussion and authentic diffusion of matter appertaining to the colored people, especially of Portland and the state of Oregon. Like Freedom's Journal, the Advocate countered erasures in the white press and created a community of readers who were often physically and or socially isolated, exiled due to segregation and discrimination. People perused the newspaper's 7 packed columns for details about the milestones that signify a community: births, graduations, weddings, and deaths. They found announcements about clubs, churches, and Black-owned businesses. And Black Portlanders, who numbered about 1,000 by 1912, could follow relevant local and national news, such as the work of the NAACP and efforts to make lynching a federal crime. The Weekly Advocate especially lived up to its name after Edward Kennedy married Beatrice Morrow in 1912. He later stated that he nearly gave up the newspaper after his colleagues departed the newspaper, and he grew weary of publishing and managing all the logistics of the newspaper while also working as the hat check man at the Grand Portland Hotel. Once Beatrice joined the Advocate as associate editor, Edward apparently yielded to her most of the responsibilities for running the Advocate. For the next 25 years, she used the Advocate to document the racism that Black Portlanders experienced in restaurants, theaters, hotels, jobs, and neighborhoods. For example, in 1930, Kennedy enthusiastically greeted physician DeNorval Unthank and his family and encouraged readers to patronize him whenever they needed medical care. But she soon reported in the Advocate that Dr. Unthank was unable to secure office space due to protests by building tenants. He relocated his practice at least 4 times before he finally was able to establish his clinic in the Arata building at Burnside and 6th Avenue. Kennedy was critical, too, of the local press. Despite the number of white-owned newspapers in Portland, among them the Oregonian, Oregon Daily Journal, and Evening Telegram, the white press rarely published positive news about blacks. As the editors of Freedom's Journal had observed a century earlier, our vices and our degradation are ever arrayed against us, but our virtues are passed by unnoticed. Moreover, for decades, news stories in the white press frequently employed racial slurs, as well as the dialect and malapropisms that became a shorthand for perpetuating myths and stereotypes of black people. Kennedy particularly condemned the telegram, which she called one of the worst enemies of the race. In a 1926 editorial, she wrote, "In the name of common decency and human respect, we call upon the daily newspapers to refrain from using humiliating and insulting terms when making references to colored people." She urged people not to patronize any newspapers that refused to change their policies and practices. By the 1920s, long-standing racism in Oregon, combined with the arrival of the Ku Klux Klan and repeated showings of the racist film The Birth of a Nation, underscored the importance of her activism and the advocate's role as a mouthpiece in the community. Kennedy's campaign to ban the silent movie that she called vicious included sending letters to local white editors, pressing officials to prohibit showings, and asking the NAACP to intervene on behalf of black Oregonians. The climate of terror worsened as more and more white Oregonians in Portland, Salem, Eugene, and other cities joined the Klan. Kennedy urged the governor to prevent the organization from holding any public demonstrations and published articles about attacks on black in Oregon City. Although the Oregon Klan's influence largely waned by the 1930s, the frightful decade left its mark on Kennedy and black Oregonians. As she wrote in 1932, "As citizens, colored people deserve all the rights and privileges and the protection as any other citizen has." By then, she had been fighting for equal rights for 20 years. She continued publishing The Advocate until about 1937, when she sold her home in Northeast Portland and moved to the Los Angeles area. She was 48 and likely tired of the constant grind of publishing. She may also have been ready to turn over the fight for equal rights to the next generation of activists. A handful of publishers tried to fill the void left by Kennedy's departure. Most newspapers for black Oregonians published between the 1930s and 1960s survived just a few years, though a notable exception was the Northwest Clarion, which lasted from 1943 to 1961. Two publications exist today. You may have heard of the Portland Observer, founded in 1970, and the Scanner, established in 1975. They are among about 350 black media outlets, whether periodicals or podcasts or radio or TV, that stretch from Washington State to Florida and Los Angeles to Boston. Why, almost 200 years since the founding of Freedom's Journal, are such outlets still relevant and important? Because stereotypes persist in mainstream media. According to a recent Pew Research Center study of black Americans' experiences with news, 4 in 5 black adults say they see racist or racially insensitive depictions of their race in the news either often or sometimes. 63% of respondents said news about black people is often more negative than it is toward other racial or ethnic groups. And 38% said it is unlikely that black Americans will be covered fairly in the news during their lifetime. As one woman in a focus group said, there is not a lot of African American coverage unless it's February or it's criminal. And so we hear the echoes from 200 years ago, when editors of Freedom's Journal stated so eloquently the importance of the public channel of communication for black Americans. Black-owned media outlets continue to differentiate themselves from mainstream media by focusing on their deep connections to the black community and by developing their own voices through authentic content. But black-owned newspapers are now just one way to connect with people. Publishers are embracing digital transformation, rebranding themselves as networks and digital media organizations while also diversifying their revenue streams. These and other changes will help to ensure the advancement and sustainability of Black-owned media outlets, perhaps for another 200 years. Thank you so much, and I'm going to introduce Charlie Dietz. Oops. Where'd this go? My bad.
Is that the microphone?
I don't know. Computer.
That's for the PC that you're not using. So
You're not gonna
just-
use
I think we're okay.
Yeah, just put it down and
Okay.
that'll be fine.
Sorry about that.
All right. Whoa. Just put that back where it was. You guys hear me okay? All right. Thank you. I'm honored to be here. My name is Charlie Dietz. I'm a career instructor at the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication. I'll do my best to keep up with my opening acts here, but I really appreciate the words and thoughts that you gave us. I think that this week, what we're doing over at the University of Oregon, the Extra Conference, is really a clarion call to really think about how much we value speech and the ability to move around freely. And I think that's what we should really get our heads around thinking, right? The Extra Conference, in conjunction with organizations like the Committee to Protect Journalists or Internews or a number of other organizations out there, is speaking to something that is not solely anecdotal. These are the real lived experience, like Farai had shared with us, that are happening all over the world. So what I'm going to do in this conversation is first give a little bit of a smattering, a scattershot of press violations that are happening currently throughout the world. And I want us to, while I'm talking, think about the way we come to understand countries that aren't the United States, the information we get from them and what we think of them, because I want us to think that oftentimes the news and information we hear from those nations is filtered through a power lens, right? And so we should call into question the information that we get. So I'll do a few anecdotes like that and share some larger scope information, as well as talk about my trip to the United Nations in Manhattan last May for World Press Freedom Day, and some anecdotes that I picked up from speaking to journalists and advocates that were there in Manhattan. Next month I'll be going to Santiago de Chile for the 31st annual conference, the World Press Freedom Day. Similar content. After which, I'll be handing it off to two of my intrepid stellar journalism students. I want you to take notice that the two students to my left are women. And while there are challenges to women in the world of journalism, that I can say, just from my experience, from my podium, that my journalism classes are mostly women in the journalism school, sometimes at a rate of 3 to 1. So we're doing something, and hopefully we can continue to do that. And as a father of a young and intrepid daughter, I hope that she can only take that example. I want to talk about news from this week. As a trained journalist myself, we'll do the news of the week. It was just 2 days ago that an exiled Afghan journalist named Ahmad Hanayesh was shot in Pakistan, shot in the leg and in the head. He survived, which is good for him. He may not be the only one. He's returning home. He's exiled in Pakistan from Afghanistan, and there's still an investigation going on as to who shot him just in a marketplace. I want to put this in context that between 1990 and 2020, Joel had alluded to some of these things. Between 1990 and 2020, 2,568 journalists were killed worldwide. That's according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. So again, keep in mind and question the information that you get and sort of the rebellion against power that a lot of times our counterparts worldwide have to endure. I want to go back a little ways and to another part of the world, to Somalia. On Saturday, October 8th, 2022, the Ministry of Information in Somalia basically issued a clampdown on information on the way that Somalian journalists could communicate. And one way they did that was by shutting down the messaging app Telegram in the country. And there have been calls to these social media digital platform providers to open their gates and stop allowing countries to clamp down, because a nationwide clampdown on Telegram meant that this is also the primary way that most of the journalists and citizens of the nation of Somalia were communicating. So what you're actually doing is you're muting voices exponentially. So a blanket statement written by the Somali Journalist Syndicate, written by and spoken by Abdali Ahmed Mumin, says the blanket suspension and ban on both media outlets and social media platforms allegedly for spreading al-Shabaab related information is worrying and restrictive in nature. For instance, the government directive suspended Telegram, which is a cloud-based encrypted and instant messaging platform used by many Somalis for sharing information. The complete shutdown of Telegram in the country not only impacts many ordinary Somalis, but puts into question the purpose of this restriction. In March of 2023, among other statements he had said, I'm just shortening it, in March of 2023 he was jailed. No charges. He was released a few days later, but he wasn't allowed to leave the country thereafter to seek medical help in Kenya. So he's being restricted. So we understand that sometimes restrictions are violent, and sometimes they're institutional, and sometimes they're technological. I want to talk about some of the anecdotes I got from World Press Freedom Day, specific to women to start off with. Khadija Ismailova from Azerbaijan had a camera placed in her bedroom. And the video of that camera was released, just her changing and being in her bedroom was released. But in that country, it was seen as shaming her, it was doxing her, it was outing her to keep her quiet. Gambian journalist Fatou Camara, the government there took a video, a porn video, and superimposed her face into the porn and then released it. In a country that's 95% Muslim and very restrictive anyway, had shamed her and made her scared to go on and continue reporting. 63% of women worldwide, women journalists worldwide, indicated they'd been threatened or harassed online. 58% indicated they had been threatened or harassed in person. A quarter of them have been physically attacked, and 1 in 10 respondents experienced a death threat in the past year. This is information current as of last year. Dana Green, the senior legal counsel for the New York Times, said harassment, intimidation, and attacks like this make the news cost more to cover. The Times invests in a security team, according to Green, and psychological support, practical support for the journalists, mentioning she was not speaking in official capacity for the Times. It has a cost. And as local journalism becomes less and less profitable, this makes it even harder to maintain, to provide. We understand the value here, and again, go back to this idea that I was talking about, is we have to question the nature of the information we get and who's telling the story. Jose Zamora, son of the jailed Guatemalan journalist and media entrepreneur Jose Ruben Zamora, shared the wide range of allegations that have circulated about his family, calling them communists, questioning their sexual orientation, and fake news about how George Soros owns Zamora's newspaper. It's these discrediting attacks also. This is another form of harassment. This is another form of muting journalists. Look quickly at social media. Rana Ayub, a journalist and columnist for the Washington Post, said she was being shadow banned on Twitter. This is what she was telling us and a cadre of students last year in Manhattan. Shadow banned on Twitter in India, and she said that all of a sudden her following had significantly downsized. Again, this is another call to not just the governments, but to the technology companies to open their gates and stop allowing countries to suppress dissident information. Now, how much time do I have, Joel? All right, we're going to do a couple minutes. There's a lot more, but I wanted to at least, kind of like stoke the fire, as it were. So what our students are doing is they've reached out to communities right here in Eugene, communities of refugees and migrants, that we want to find out, how do they get their information from their home countries? Because that's important. You leave, you want to find out what's going on back home. So first I want to introduce Malia Fass, and after that will be Julia Bobak, who will talk about their respective experiences briefly as a prelude to their Sunday at 10:30 in the morning at the Urban Memorial Union presentation for the Extra conference. But Malia, why don't you tell us what you found out briefly?
Hello. My name is Malia Fass. I'm a junior at the School of Journalism and Communications at the University of Oregon, and I had the wonderful opportunity to be a part of this conference, to go out into the Lane County community and speak with individuals who are refugees and migrants living here, to talk to them about how they get their news and their perception of news media here in Eugene and how they get news from back home. I sat down with a woman, a refugee from Afghanistan. I walked into her home. She made me a cup of tea. Her 8-year-old son shook my hand with both of his, and I nearly shed a tear because it was adorable. And I sat down with her and talked to her a little bit about her relationship with news media, and had no idea how naive my questions were, because she was a journalist in exile herself. She spoke to me about how she's working in childcare and talked about how she worked on the TV back in Afghanistan. And I said, "So you were a journalist?" And she talked to me about her experience and how she had to immigrate to the US because of being a writer in exile. Her and her family got here to Eugene in February of last year and have now started a private internet news company where they are reporting from Eugene, working with reporters in Afghanistan. And I spoke to her a little bit about her experience as a woman being a female journalist in Afghanistan, as well as balancing her love and passion and fire for journalism, not being able to do it in her home country. It was really important to her that she continues to report in her native language, and that she gets to report news to people who need that information, where the news is so censored in her home country. The conversation was wildly insightful and definitely the most incredible experience I've had as a journalist, and opened my eyes even more to how much gratitude I can have to be not just a journalist, but a female journalist, and the opportunity that I get to study this practice under these incredible people who have so much passion for telling the information that needs to be told. So I'll be speaking about my conversation with her this Sunday at the conference, as well as my colleague Julia here, who also went out into the community to do the same thing.
Hello, my name is Julia Bobach. I talked to 3 women in Portland who came from different Latin American countries. I talked to Mary Avalos from Mexico, Ana Claudia Mauriño Cortés from Chile, Santiago, Chile, where the conference will be held, which is cool. And I also talked to Daphne Alvarez from Colombia. And I asked them about the news that they consumed, specifically looking at the comparison between news from their country, their home country, about their home country, and the news from America about their home country, looking at whether they feel that they are being in any way misrepresented, or if the news from their home country or from the US is influenced by any factors, government, money, public perception, things like that. They had incredible insights, truly 3 of the best conversations I've had in my life with 3 of the most intelligent women I've ever spoken to, who have come to the US in very different forms, but are all very grateful for the opportunities that they have had and for the life that they are able to create for themselves here. And I'll be quick because I know we're kind of taking up time, but I wanted to end with the final message of my project, which if you can't make it to the EMU building, not the ERB building, the EMU building on campus, I wanted to end with, I talked to all of the women about whether they feel they are in the audience of American journalism, whether American journalism about immigration is written with them in mind. And they all really said no. And I think this is a really important issue that needs to be addressed. I think when we write about foreign countries and when we write about immigration, we should be considering the way immigrants, which make up a large part of this country, perceive this information. And going even farther than that, we should have immigrants in journalism. We should have immigrants sharing stories about immigration in our newsrooms, and that's something that's really important for me. My parents were journalists, so I get this secondary source of passion for journalism. But if we want to write about immigration, and if we want to write about other countries considerately, we need to have people from other countries input on that. And that was really important to me, and I am eternally grateful for this opportunity and for the privilege I have in being able to do this project, and I hope you guys are able to enjoy it. So thank you very much.
We will get there. Questions are next. And thank you so much to our panelists. But first, before questions, I want to thank the business and in-kind sponsors whose support helps to make City Club possible. Thank you to our gold sponsors, Network Charter School, Hirschner Hunter LLC, Evans Elder Brown and Subert, and Hudson Dental. Thank you also to our in-kind sponsors, KRVM 91.9 Radio, Alpha IT, Dotson's Photography, and Kid Sports. Also a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station, KLCC FM 89.7, for airing City Club programs Monday nights at 7 p.m. For those of you listening at home right now or in the car, your household is one of several thousand tuning into City Club, and we love that you're here. You can also find all recent City Club programs archived on KLCC, as well as on our YouTube channel and as podcasts. We'll take a brief break before returning for question and answer. Thank you.
Okay. Before we start the question period of our program, I wanted to introduce some of the people who are here from the conference. Peter David Laufer, Professor Laufer, is the brains behind the whole operation, and he has passed out the programs on all the tables. I strongly urge you to read them. Two of the people who I heard yesterday were Jeff Kamen, who was around here earlier wearing an Oregon t-shirt, who covered Dr. Martin Luther King and was beaten by the police for his coverage, made national news.
Excuse me for interrupting, Joel, but he was beaten by the Klan while the police stood by watching.
He was beaten by the Klan while the police stood by watching. Also with us today is Catherine Corcoran, who wrote out of Mexico and has a book, In the Mouth of the Wolf, A Murder, a Cover-Up, and True Cost of Silencing the Press. And she may have a couple with her today, if you're interested. So the first question will be asked by Mary.
Mary Layton, member of City Club, and an editor of magazines and newspapers since I was 14, through my high school, through the University of Chicago, and ever after that. But my question is really a celebration of your work. I would like each of you to tell us one story about a story you had published that you're really proud of, that whatever the cost was, maybe it wasn't that, maybe there wasn't a cost, but a story that you're really grateful that in your lifetime as a journalist you had a chance to get published.
So maybe I can start since I have the microphone. So I worked for the electronic media, radio and television. So we would go out in the rural areas with an outside broadcast van to get information. Like I said before, we had children who couldn't go to school, like proceed to school because they didn't have birth certificates. So we would get all those interviews, and I came to Harare, to headquarters, and I went to the Registrar General. I played all those audios to him. So he made an effort to prepare outside registration vans which went into the rural areas to register those kids so that they could have birth certificates. So they didn't have any hospital record. So they just needed the parents and two other witnesses to witness that this child was born here, and the parents knew the dates. So a lot of them ended up having birth certificates as a result of that program that we had on radio. Amen. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
My journalism career is still budding, but I guess I'll just, since it is still budding, the first profile I ever wrote was about my mom, and that was probably it's one of my favorite stories because I'm biased because she's my mom, but I really loved writing about her because of her story of immigration, and really I think I kind of always end up interviewing women and writing about women because they are extremely inspiring. And so her story of all of the sacrifices that she made to get me here really educated now the way that I go about writing stories now, and focusing on what do people give up in order to live the lives that they want, and how are they thinking about the long term and thinking about the people that they care about always before themselves. And in writing many profiles after that, I have noticed that is somewhat of a communal human experience, is giving up things for others. And so why not talk about my mom, since this is going to be posted? She'll be very happy about that. She's from Romania. She immigrated in the 90s at the height of, or post-revolution, after the communist dictatorship. So yeah.
Also budding journalism career. And I think that along the lines of my favorite piece that I've had published, I wrote a story kind of doing research on, well, more along the media study side almost, talking about how early 2000s and 1990s media kind of took a framework to influence and how that influenced women that were growing up in that era. So I got to speak with a few women about how they felt influenced by the media that they were surrounded with as children, and how that they feel that inspires them still today, or kind of uninspires them still today. And it was a really interesting project to kind of take on as someone who grew up along that time period. Lots of fun. I really honestly have to say that this is my favorite project that I've done, and I think you would agree as well, which is kind of a cop-out answer. But being able to sit and talk to these women was just such an unbelievable experience, and I think it will continue to be my favorite project that I have taken on. I'll pass this around. Anybody ready for it? Yeah.
It's a hard question, but I think for most journalists, the first time you get a byline, it's pretty thrilling. And for me, I was an undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, and I was driving from Fullerton into downtown Los Angeles every day to do an internship. And and I was working for an in-flight magazine company, and the airline's gone, but my first byline was working for that internship and publishing at places that I did not get to visit, but I got a byline. It was pretty fun.
Some really good past work there, by the way. I spent a number of years as an NPR affiliate reporter, so I had a lot of cool access, but the one that always gets me the most is I was invited to this conference called Western Mass where I was reporting, and I was very rural. I was invited to the upper deck of a barn in which a bunch of kids from the area, from all over the region, were invited to talk about their experiences attempting suicide, having come out as gay as high school students, and I was allowed access to that, and it's one of those environments where I was in there and I was holding back things where you're trying to cover something, but you're also experiencing. Really what comes to mind is maybe my favorite or most provocative story about I experienced this community to be trusted to. You guys just heard what these two students, that's my favorite project. Like being able to do this, right? Being able to do this, that's my favorite project. Appreciate the question though.
Sharon?
With all of the inherent risks and threats